So I am speaking today on the impact of parents and the need for equitable bereavement care. And I'm going to talk about an overview of the emotional burden on families following a baby's death, but also disparities that challenge equitable bereavement care. 2 weeks before Christmas in 2006, my life changed in a way that would completely alter the trajectory of my future. I tell my story from a place of healing, but also I want to portray the rawness and intense trauma that accompanies pregnancy and infant loss. It is in this brokenness, in this isolation, in this vulnerability that we can best understand bereavement needs and support. A very wise friend of mine, who happens to be in our audience today, taught me an important lesson about continuum of care. She said, as families travel their journey of grief, they are forced to walk through many doors. Their story, their support systems, their care, their tragedy goes with them. While in the healthcare system, we as bereaved parents need to be accompanied to each door. We enter and hand it off to someone on the other side to continue our journey through the next door. Our history and our stories need to go with us as patients. The idea of doors has stuck with me. And because I'm a former English teacher and I love symbolism, I want to use that idea here today. My son Benjamin was stillborn on December 12, 2006, when I was 39 weeks along in my pregnancy. The prior day, due to lack of movement, I entered a hospital door for a non-stress test and met heartbreak just beyond its threshold. The hospital door was not easy for us to get to because I lived in Ephraim, Utah, and I had to drive 90 minutes one way for my appointments. I lived in a medical desert for OB care. These deserts are one of the real barriers that families in our country face to receive equitable health care. In fact, medical deserts are a risk factor for increased stillbirth. When I returned home after Benjamin died, I returned home to a mental health desert as well. As I walked through the hospital door that day, my life changed forever. Since then, my knowledge of equitable bereavement care has increased, and I can see that although I had a distance to travel to the hospital, I walked in those doors as a straight, white, upper middle class, married woman. The door was wide open for me. And I want to acknowledge and recognize my privilege in that moment. For some, hospital doors are barriers to adequate health care, systematic and generational trauma, distrust in the medical system, or not accessibility to financial constraints. I have queer friends who did not have access to their baby's records or health care decisions. Hospital doors may be challenging for some to open and feel closed or barricaded for others. The next door that I entered was labor and delivery. I remember the exact words as a sonographer read the ultrasound that afternoon. As you can see, there is no heartbeat. I remember my husband's face. I remember that my nurse was pregnant. I remember that my contractions started immediately. After 18 years, my memory still clings to phrases, random faces, the terror that I felt, but I don't remember switching rooms or ever being put in a hospital gown or being told a plan for what we were going to do. We were put in a labor and delivery room away from the nursery in the corner, and I believe that I went into shock immediately, and that my contractions began as a result. I feel that shock protects us from the reality of trauma, and I think that it wrapped around me like a warm blanket of protection. I do remember my husband's face, and I remember the pain that flashed in his eyes over and over and over again. He called our parents. He called my sister to pick up the boys, to keep them safe. He called the mortuary. He called the city offices for a burial plot. He could not stop crying. When a mom is delivering a stillborn baby, the room is hauntingly quiet. People speak in hushed voices and whispers. There is no heart monitor that hums and shifts with contractions and movement, just silence. Silence and immense sadness. My hospital room door softly opened over and over again as I labored for the next 31 hours. As my husband and I navigated the tender journey of saying hello and goodbye to our son, we did the best we could do with the information we were given in our emotional state. I spent 2 hours with Benjamin before he was taken to the morgue. We never got him dressed. We never wrapped him in a blanket, put a diaper on him, or held him in our arms. We declined an autopsy due to financial constraints and incorrect information. As we all know in this room, and we should say this together, autopsies are free in the state of Utah. And that they do find answers. When we were asked about photos, I told the nurse no. Why would we ever want to remember that day? We were never asked again. That decision is one of the biggest regrets of my life. My husband and I snapped one photo of our hands holding Benjamin's hand. The photo is the only thing that I would leave the hospital with. And today I'm a bereavement photographer. I remember the nurse took Benjamin away before we brought in our boys. They were excited to meet the new baby, and it was our job as parents to explain what had happened. They would not meet Benjamin that day at the hospital, but briefly at the mortuary before the funeral. I remember the sobs, knowing that part of them would never be the same. Death had touched them, it had beaten them in a way that no child should experience. I knew that moment that our family photo would never be complete. In the coming months, they would sleep on my bedroom floor at night on little beds that they made. I would lay awake and watch them breathe, and I would get up at night to make sure that they were okay. They would struggle emotionally, socially, and even physically. I wonder now what bereavement care would have looked like for them. We shelter our children from the harm, the fear, the reality of death, and when it comes, it can be brutal on children. Life and death, before and after, wholeness and brokenness, happiness and sadness. Before Benjamin's funeral, I watched my boys stuff their favorite toys and art and messages into Benjamin's tiny casket for him to keep forever. When the beloved teddy bear went in, it almost broke me. This was their way of grieving. We had the funeral before the snowstorm hit. It was almost Christmas, and the world was bustling to finish up before the holiday. Benjamin's Christmas stocking was hanging on the mantle, and his presents were wrapped under our tree. My husband carried Benjamin's casket while the boys followed behind me. It was cold. I wrapped him in a warm blanket and put a white hat on his head. I would later put a solar light at his grave as a nightlight. I could see the men who would fill his grave with dirt in the corner of the cemetery. Their truck was running because it was cold. Everyone hurried from the cemetery due to the weather. They went back to our house to eat. The men were waiting. How does one just drive away from a baby's grave? We didn't know how to do that part. How were parents supposed to do that part? Do we just drive away? I smiled in the photo next to his grave and the little white casket. It would be the last photo my boys would be all together. I smiled. Is that what we're supposed to do? The shock and the numbness were so intense, I remember watching the story like it was a movie playing out in front of me. I felt that a piece of myself crawled into the casket with him that day to keep him warm, to keep him safe. I didn't know. When I walked in the front door of my home after the funeral, my milk came in. In reality, I feel that it was this door, my own home, that broke me. I sat on the bathroom floor holding my chest while relatives ate ham and funeral potatoes in my kitchen. It all seems so strange now, even 18 years later. It is one of the most important events in my life that I see in glimpses because trauma was so intense. The smile in the photos will always haunt me because I didn't know how to be me anymore. Parts of my identity, my existence, my purpose, my heart were falling off of me. And I walked on, leaving a trail of loneliness and isolation and womanhood and peace and safety in my wake. When I returned to Provo for my 6-week postpartum check from delivery, I was greeted by an enthusiastic receptionist who gave me a pile of formula coupons and asked if she could see my baby. My doctor never did touch me during my postpartum exam or provide additional follow-up, in spite of my high blood pressure, continued bleeding, an infection in my chest lining, and physical and emotional exhaustion. I would never hear from his office again. It would be 8 years before I would reach out to a peer support program. The pressure of Benjamin's death eventually broke my children wide open, and we began to drive to Primary Children's Hospital for therapy. It was 2 hours from my home, taking an entire day and more missed school to battle the extreme anxiety and depression that settled on my boys. Our family was rebuilding systems that we once thought were absolute. The medical system, our family system, religious systems, the world in general. We had to rebuild them all. We were running through doors of grief and rebuilding so quickly and violently that it would be years before we opened an important door to healing. The reality now is my biological sons are more likely to experience a stillbirth because of our genetic history. They are aware of this risk, and the threat of stillbirth runs like lightning through our memories and in our blood. My grandma had 2 stillbirths. I remember that she whispered about her babies when she told their stories. Did anyone speak with my grandmother when her babies died? She had home births. What care did she receive? Because 60 years later, she still couldn't speak about her sons other than in hushed tones. Her first baby was named Lawrence Andrew Nielsen after my grandpa. The doctor who delivered the little baby said that he saw the baby shudder. This was a sign of life that everyone needed, and my grandma was comforted to know that he would be hers in the next life, in the hereafter, she would say. And she would see him again. She had a blurry picture of him taken through the house window and a photo of his casket. The next baby that she delivered died before birth. There was no life when he entered this world, no breath, no shudder, no heartbeat. I remember her explaining that she didn't know what would happen to this baby because he didn't take a breath. She had been taught that breath determined existence. The sweet little boy was never named. It was just a fact to my grandma. That's just what they would say. Yet I never remember her talking about one baby without mentioning the other. I wish I would have asked her more. I was one of the few grandchildren that knew the story. I didn't know then that I would be walking down a similar road in my own future. I think of my grandma a lot and the loneliness that she felt so many years ago when she walked through that door of grief. I remember when she died that she felt that she would be greeted by her sons. She was already gone when Benjamin died, but I'd like to think that she found me in the darkness and sent me some light and love. Trauma travels through space and time, through generations. It forms who we become and develops struggles that challenge us to our core. My grandmother, my sons, and now my daughters. I can't look at them. We have 3 generations who experience deep grief and the need for intense bereavement care on countless levels. The continuum of care after the doctor left my grandma's home, after my sons began to sleep on my bedroom floor, after I entered a world of isolation and PTSD, and now my daughters, who are the beautiful Black women who stand with me today. They are twice as likely to experience stillbirth as mothers. Not because of genetics, they are adopted, but because of the color of their skin. The color of their skin. Doors that are open to me do not open to them. Bias, racism, and distrust have followed them into adulthood. Even now, I watch them struggle to open doors that only moments earlier I walked through. I have privilege that they will never, ever know. I tell our stories because providers and clinicians need to understand what happens not only in hospital systems, but when we walk back out those doors into our homes. Is there someone to walk with us? Is there someone on the other side of those doors? Or do we enter a world of isolation and deep grief alone? What happens to us next? What doors are held open for us for our next experiences? And what doors must we bang on and beg for keys to enter and heal? I work with the most amazing clinicians and providers. The nurses who took care of me at the hospital years ago were sincere, loving, and compassionate. But I needed to be shown how to parent my baby. The system needed more. I needed someone like myself, a bereaved parent, to sit with me and show me that I would live through the darkness and model the care that I needed to give my son, to tell me how to care for his little body. I needed follow-up care and family support and financial help and so many things. They were simply not available in my location and situation, or I didn't know how to access them. When a baby dies, parents need resources and continuum of care. So much happens when we walk through the front doors of our homes. But just imagine those families who do not have a home, or a partner, or a support system, or a community. These are gaps that as providers we must fill. As humans, we must fill. As we look around this room this day, I want you to look at your support groups and clinical schedules. How many people of color do we see? Yet we know that these populations, Zan just told us, carry the highest burden and heaviest systematic injustices. This is where we begin. When we walk out of the door of this building, we leave as different people, as more complete caregivers, as better educated citizens, as humans who not only see the gaps and injustices, but as advocates who step forward and lean in to fill those spaces. I appreciate your time and opportunity to share my story and the life and legacy of my sweet Benjamin. Families whose babies die have a place in this work. We become very, very intentional. They would say helicopter type parents. We raise empathetic children. We heal and we thrive. We fight as advocates. We lead and participate in research. And we learn to sit in the quiet and guide other families into their journey of grief and rebuilding. We wait behind and in the thresholds of open doors and open arms with those who travel similar roads. Thank you.